Okay, so let's start. First of all, welcome everybody. We are very happy to launch this series of webinars on urban artificial intelligence. This series that we call Mapping Urban AI. It's a series, as you know, of 5 episodes where we will be discussing different ways, different projects, strategies that cities around the world are using to implement artificial intelligence projects. Today we are starting with two amazing case studies, the city of Barcelona and the city of New York. I will introduce that in a minute. But before that, let me introduce or say a few words about the reasons why we are launching these webinars, and also with presentation words on the organizations that are leading these webinars. So this is an initiative co-organized by CIDOB, the Barcelona Center of International Affairs, and Urban AI, a think tank based in France, dealing with urban artificial intelligence research. At CIDOB, we are a think tank on international relations based in Barcelona. Since 2018, we launched a global cities program where basically we aim at mapping and discussing some of the greatest challenges that cities around the world are facing. I'm leading the research on the socioeconomical and the digitalization challenges that cities are facing, and within this research line, we are leading a joint project together with the City Council of Barcelona, the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights, which is called the Global Observatory on Urban Artificial Intelligence. Within this Global Observatory, what we aim at doing is mapping and doing research on how cities can implement artificial intelligence project that is aligned with digital rights and with ethical principles. Within this framework, couple of some months ago, we launched an initiative called the Atlas of Urban AI, and I'm going to share with you in a minute our atlas. I hope you can see it correctly. If not, please let me know. So what we did was launch, trying in this effort that the Global Observatory of Urban Artificial Intelligence has of mapping and documenting the efforts that cities worldwide are doing to advance on artificial intelligence using these ethical lenses or this ethical approach. We launched this initiative to sort of like map a different initiative around the world. This is an ongoing project. Today we have 55 initiatives, 55 cities and 150 initiatives, and you can see different projects, policies, strategies. You can also filter according to topic, according to the ethical principle that each initiative is contributing to. And we really hope that this series of webinars also help us increase the number of cases we have in this atlas of urban AI. So without taking more time of the introduction, I'm going now to present the 2 speakers that we have today. The session will be devoted to discussing the strategies of urban artificial intelligence. So many cities around the world are developing specific projects or pilots using artificial intelligence technologies, but not all cities have holistic strategies. This is something we have: the city of Barcelona, the city of New York, the city of Amsterdam, the city of Buenos Aires, but this is something quite unique. This is why we invited these 2 leading cities to discuss first what is the value of having this strategy, and also what are the challenges of governing artificial intelligence, taking this broader look. So we have Paula Boet, who is project manager of the Barcelona City Council, and then we have Alex Foard, who is executive director of the Research and Collaboration Office within the New York City Office of Technology and Innovation. Well, thank you both for joining today. Very happy to have you here. And I'll start by you, Paula. Can you explain us why Barcelona has an AI strategy? How did you arrive to that point? Perhaps give us some insights. Also, interestingly, both cities developed the strategy or published the strategy more or less at the same time in 2021, even if, and I'm sure both speakers will speak about that, there were particularly Paula, there were initiatives before having an AI strategy. So the AI policy of the city of Barcelona doesn't start with that strategy. But interestingly, Paula will speak from the perspective of an administration that is the one that actually created this strategy. And Alex will speak from the perspective of an administration that sort of inherited one strategy and now still, has the challenge of governing that. Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you, CIDOB and Urban AI for organizing this, and good to say hi to everyone. I'm also really looking forward to the conversation afterwards and to listening to my colleague Alex from New York. I'm going to share some slides to back up my presentation. But yeah, let me know if there are any questions by typing in the chat, and we'll answer them afterwards. So yeah, as Marta just explained, I'm going to give you an overview of Barcelona's AI strategy, why we felt like we needed to create an AI strategy, what this AI strategy covers, why is it necessary in general for local governments to have AI strategies, and what challenges, and what kind of things have to be included in an AI strategy, and also how is life after releasing an AI strategy, which I think is an important kind of step. So first, yeah, I asked ChatGPT-3 why do local governments need to create artificial intelligence strategies, and although it wasn't a very good answer, I think it covered the basic principles, And I like to do this exercise because precisely what we aim to do with this strategy is govern AI, which is something that cannot be automated. And I think this is one important thing that's going to be recurrent throughout my presentation. That while we can automate things to bring greater value to citizens, to provide more efficient services, there's a human layer and a governance layer and an accountability layer that we cannot automate, and this is, I think, at the core of governing AI. Also, why do we need to govern AI strategies? To avoid things from going wrong, We usually hear from AI systems, algorithmic systems, or a type of automated system through scandals that go to the news. But this is not the only application or the only kind of way that AI can work, But we do learn about them, about these kind of systems. When they go wrong, they vulnerate human rights. And we have some cases. We had in England during COVID, since students could not take their A-levels, they were graded based on using an algorithmic system based on past data from their academic grades, but also with data on their neighborhood, for instance, or on using their school average grades, which was prejudicial for those students living in worse areas that were worst economically. Here in Catalonia, we have a case of an algorithmic system that's used to classify the level of risk of inmates to decide whether they should be paroled, and this raised a lot of concern in the media because it was not transparent. It did not go through any kind of audit. No one could look at what was really happening, and what we had in reality was a very small team of professionals from the Department of Justice that had created that system. They didn't have any notion about transparency. Why do we need this? But at the end of the day, the decisions that they were taking with this system were affecting inmates and their fundamental rights. We also have the case of Bosco, which is an algorithm that was used to automatize the process of granting subsidies to access a government subsidy to pay for electricity here in Spain at the whole of nation, and the system was failing by error, and it was more than 1 million people who could not access to this subsidy. So this, you see, it's not just vulnerating rights, but it's also having a massive impact on a lot of people. So we don't want things to go wrong. And we also know that, and Marta already showed you the atlas, we also know that AI can have tremendous opportunities for city governments and for better and more livable urban spaces. No, you can check out the atlas for examples of projects or strategies that are aligned with this kind of ethical or responsible view of AI. And some examples from Barcelona. Some small projects and pilots that we have include, for instance, we use AI for anonymizing pictures to estimate beach capacity. We have drones that take pictures of the beaches in the city, and these pictures go to our provider server, who applies an AI system that anonymizes by default the images. No, they place this kind of pink dots on people's faces, and it counts people. So that's one application to manage public space. No, we also use an algorithmic system to process the information of citizen inquiries and complaints through our IRIS portal, which is our direct interaction with citizens. And we also have a very interesting case that's used by the social services department. It's not directly interacting with citizens, but it's more used to systematize and kind of standardize their responses to citizens. So it's used as a support to decision making for social servants, for civil servants working in the social services. And these are examples of algorithmic systems that can be applied for users to increase people's well-being, but that of course also need to undergo certain checks and balances to make sure that we're not including discrimination by design or incurring in any kind of privacy vulnerations and so on. So with this kind of context in mind, and these small pilots that we had, we had some small initiatives. We also had a political declaration, as Marta was mentioning, put out by the political level of the city. It's called Barcelona Declaration on Technological Humanism, and it's a position of the city to declare that it's in favor of a technological development that that favors people and that leaves no one behind. We needed to create this ethical artificial intelligence strategy. The main goal for this strategy is to make municipal services and internal processes more effective and efficient. That's why we apply artificial intelligence, also to give more value to citizens and to better respond to their needs, while we are protecting people's rights. And to achieve this, we needed to establish these our guiding principles at the municipal level. We needed to align our efforts and actions across departments, across areas, across also different organizations within the city council, and we needed to create oversight and governance mechanisms, because so far we only had these small pilots that people, maybe an innovative area that had a very innovative director was following, but maybe other areas were not. And what if they also want to, I don't know, deploy a system? They didn't have any guiding kind of principle, and we could not leave this at the discretion of each individual. By the way, you have here a QR code in case you want to check out the full strategy. This strategy, what it does, it sets out the high-level ethical guiding principles, which are these that you can find here, which are technical robustness and security. So making sure that the system is technically working and it's secure. Transparency, so making sure that the system, that we can explain why a system made a decision, that we are not creating black box algorithms, which are called this way, that we also, responsibility, democratic control and accountability, that we are accountable for the decisions that a system makes, and that we are able to also, this is very linked with explainability, privacy and data governance. So here in Europe, we have the GDPR, and we also have a national data protection law at the local level. So we wanted to make sure that the algorithms and the data used for these aligns with these laws and regulations, but that we also put in place data governance frameworks or kind of agreements, also because we interact a lot with the private sector. Also diversity, inclusion, and equity. So making sure that these systems serve this kind of purposes, and social and environmental commitment. This one, to be honest, the environmental commitment is one of the homework that we still have left. So I'm also curious if you have any experience on how we can really make sure at the city level that we support this principle, because it's difficult to really assess what environmental impact an algorithmic system has with all the kind of, well, the most directly visible are data centers, but all kind of the chain that's behind an algorithmic system. No? So this is, I would say, still homework to do. And we also, in this ethical artificial intelligence strategy, we defined some actions, no? And among them, there's international action for ethical AI, which we do through the Global Observatory of Urban AI, also the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights. And one of the most interesting, I think, is the last one, which sounds really boring and bureaucratic, methodologies and protocol to implement the strategy, but it's also, it's actually like the roadmap for implementing the strategy. So what we realized was that we had this very nice strategy that with very nice and flashy principles, no, that was good for a website or media, but how did we really make it actionable, and how did we go towards implementation? So that's why we created this AI Lifecycle protocol that we published last December. And this protocol, what it does, it looks at the whole life cycle of an algorithmic system from when a municipal area or department wants to implement an algorithmic system, no, until when it's dismantled. So what needs to happen at each stage of its development to make sure that we're not vulnerating fundamental rights and that we are being compliant with our principles, the principles that we committed to, no? It follows the EU's AI risk classification. So I'm not sure, maybe some of you are familiar with it, but the AI Act proposal that is currently being discussed at the European level defines these 4 levels of risk based on the use case, on where the algorithm is applied. So it's not the system per se, but it's the context where it's applied. So for instance, social scoring used to, or like social credit to rank people and to grant them access or not to certain services, that's totally prohibited. And that's classified as an acceptable risk. No? Then we have high risk, which are applications of AI systems that could have a direct impact on people's fundamental rights, which, for instance, and for us, as a city government, imply employment, for instance, access to equal opportunities of employment, or access to justice, education, all these kind of very sensitive areas, also policing, maybe. There's also the limited and minimal risk algorithms, which are not, are applications that don't have a higher risk on affecting people's fundamental rights, but that still need some kind of transparency or data protection mechanisms. No? So what we did was use this kind of this tiering that the EU makes, and we applied it at our local level. So we say when one of the municipal departments wants to create mostly we have to go to the market and buy a system or buy the service of an algorithmic system. We don't develop ourselves. Some cases we do, but we don't have like a unit that develops algorithms. We mostly procure, no? So when someone wants to procure an algorithm, we look at it and we say, okay, where do you want to apply it? Is it an acceptable risk? Is it high risk, or is it limited or minimal risk? Unacceptable risk algorithms are totally banned, so they cannot be procured. And with high risk algorithms, they have to go through very strict checks. And the other ones have to go to lighter kind of mechanisms, as I will explain now, but they can be procured pretty easily. So yeah, here, I mean, this is also another very boring kind of schema, but you can see how from the design of the service until the dismantling of the service, so up to top, we introduce each kind of layer of kind of check of mechanism to ensure that we are being compliant with our our principles. And I don't want to get into a lot of detail with all of them because you can also read our protocol online, but I wanted to bring some of the most interesting, I think, mechanisms that we are introducing. So for instance, the first one that I wanted to talk about is this algorithmic impact assessment, which we make obligatory for high-risk algorithms. It is conducted by an external AI advisory board. It's made of academics and experts from the university world, so from academia, that work on the social impact of AI, both from the ethical and more like humanities, social sciences field, but also from the technical and more like engineering field. You know? And what they do is that they stop for a minute, and ask questions. So they ask where the system is going to be applied, why was this system considered high risk, what a priori, like what kind of inaccuracies or errors could be defined, what kind of data is going to be used, what kind of risks around data, so privacy data, but also what kind of biases could happen, what processes is this system embedded in, so is this system directly related to the citizen, is the system used to systematize information, for instance, because we say that it's not the same to have a system that is directly deciding who, for instance, who gets a job, and you just don't get an interaction with a human, than having a system that helps you standardize who got a job in the past to be able to make better recommendations. If there's a human that's looking at what the system said and can critically reflect on whether that decision was right or not, and can have an Am I muted?
You're unmuted now, Paula.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So and what also I think it's very interesting that this algorithmic impact assessment does, it defines the stakeholders that should be consulted and while the system is deployed. So if you are implementing a system that affects employment, who you should access, what kind of communities or the individuals you should talk to make sure that their views are being respected, to integrate the users in the whole development of the system. And lastly, this kind of this assessment, what lays out are recommendations and mitigation measures to make sure that if the department decides to go on with the procurement of the system, they implement these mitigation measures, that they make sure that things don't go wrong by implementing these mitigation measures. And very linked to this is these procurement clauses that were first designed by the city of Amsterdam, which are kind of setting the rules of the game with the private sector, who we go to buy these algorithmic systems, to establish clear rules of the game of what can be expected from them in order for us to comply with law, because we are public organizations, public bodies that are subject to certain transparency laws, and we need to, for instance, explain why we made that decision. We always need to be able to do it, and therefore we need some information to be able to do so. So with these clauses that are also online that you can download, they're already made by Amsterdam. We are adapting them to our local context. We introduce these obligations for suppliers to comply with all of the mechanisms that I highlighted before. And I think a very interesting kind of debate here that we are also having with the private sector is that what's the balance? What's the kind of trade-offs between transparency and intellectual property? Because one of the arguments usually for not putting transparency in place, putting algorithmic transparency in place, is that companies have intellectual property, they sell these systems, that they are code, and they cannot disclose it because that way they would lose their kind of product. What we try to do is to find the sweet spot between the public information that we can provide through an algorithm register, as I will explain now, and intellectual property. So we are discussing with the private sector, and I think this is very important to involve a conversation with stakeholders, not just decide something, but like actually talk to them, to create different layers of transparency. And this access to the code, which we cannot make public, is going to be regulated through NDAs, through specific agreements, allowing us to look at the code if a judicial requirement comes, or when we do our yearly algorithmic audits, making sure that we don't publish the code or anything related to the code. So kind of also, and I think this is also interesting, AI governance is sometimes not about going to the maximum, but like finding this balance, you know, between the private sector and the public interest. And yeah, another interesting tool, I think, to explain today is these AI registers, which they are public websites, public repositories of algorithmic systems with information on algorithmic systems and where they are running in the city. Amsterdam and Helsinki were the pioneering cities to create them some years ago already. And they created this website with some information on some systems in the city. But as we have gone, like the years have passed, we have seen that we needed to standardize the information that was published in this website, and we created together with, well, thanks to Eurocities and their digital forum, which is a community of cities working on digital topics, we created this algorithmic transparency standard, which is an interoperable, open source, free way of it's basically a data schema, an Excel sheet that you can download, and that sets out all the categories that you need of information that you need to gather and publish on an algorithmic standard. So you will see, I mean, there's a lot of categories, but this was a way of standardizing the work around transparency in algorithmic decision making. And this was done by 9 European cities. So we think that this is a good iteration of this first exercise that was done by Amsterdam and Helsinki. And my take on algorithm registers is that in order to have one, you first need to do the housekeeping, no? So all the steps that I explained before, and also the AI strategy is very necessary in order to make sure that the information you publish is meaningful for citizens, and it's not just a nice website, because this is also one of the reflections that the colleagues in Amsterdam made after years of running the register, that they needed not to make sure that they had all the information internally or all the processes internally, to publish the information, and not just to have a nice website with some information on algorithms. No, citizens want to know what's happening, and I mean, they have the right, no? So yeah, that's the efforts we are in right now. And before wrapping up, some final reflections. So I think an AI strategy is a useful mechanism to start the conversation on what principles and what kind of vision needs to guide the deployment of AI. So it's both with citizens, but also within the organization. So I think, and especially now that we're seeing, the technological innovations are being launched to market and are gaining popularity in our current lives every day. This kind of debates are rising. So having this opportunity to create an AI strategy is a good way to create this kind of dialogues, within city governments. It's also a way to steer individual projects and pilots towards more ambitious goals and purposes, towards a bigger or like a higher strategy, and making sure that we're not just automating for automating, that we are doing it to, for instance, make sure that we're giving value to citizens, that we're answering to their needs better, that we're aligning with the SDGs, for instance, but also that we're answering the challenges that the city has with the climate emergency and so on. So that making sure that we're not just automating for the sake of automation.
If you could start just wrapping up, sorry.
Sure, it's the last sentences. And yeah, as I was saying, AI strategies are important, but what comes next is even more important, and really looking at the kind of small pieces that need to be put together in order to make sure that you have responsible AI and transparent AI. And involving a wide range of departments, within the city, not just making sure that it's not just an initiative from one department, but that everyone is on the table, and also external stakeholders. So the private sector, but also the general public, and that would be my presentation for today. Yeah, looking forward to listening.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paula. Many things to explain, because Barcelona is very active on the field. But hopefully we have still some time for the participants to ask or ask you to go deeper into some of the aspects that you brought to your presentation today. But next, let's move now to the other part of the world, to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and let's welcome Alex from the city of New York. Alex, the floor is yours to learn a bit more about how New York is governing AI, not only by having a strategy, but also by having other types of mechanisms in place that I'm sure that you will explain us today.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to, is my volume okay? I know I was having some audio stuff. Yeah.
You sound fantastic.
Okay, great. So I just want to quickly reiterate thanks to CIDOB and Urban AI for hosting today and having us. And I just want to say that I'm actually grateful to have gone second, because I think Paula's presentation first laid out some of the key considerations that are sort of relevant for everybody. And so I'm really sort of happy that that was there to sort of set the stage. And then also, we didn't plan this, but her final note in her presentation around sort of the AI strategy is good, but what happens next is a perfect segue, because that's actually where I would like to speak about today. And as Marta mentioned at the outset, we're an organization and a government that did have a change last year. We had an election in 2021. And so that changes our dynamic, changes our perspective and our outputs. So I want to talk a little bit about that today and orient things around our current set of thinking and our evolution from an AI strategy to an AI action plan. And then talk a little bit about the value of that and what we think are the keys to success for that. So just a couple notes organizationally. Like I said, we did have an election in 2021. Mayor Eric Adams took office in January 2022. And so we had to sort of, go with the flow of government, right? Of elections and democratic governments, and that changes the perspective and the priorities. One of the key things that happened very early in the first year of Mayor Adams' administration was a consolidation of the city's data and technology offices. And what we had in previous administrations was sort of a network of agencies and offices that dealt with issues of technology, data management, info privacy, et cetera. And although there was communication across those, there wasn't sort of a unifying direction or unifying policy process. And so Mayor Adams signed an executive order early in 2022 that consolidated all of these offices together and created the new Office of Technology and Innovation, where my team sits. And so that brought together, like I said, our city's traditional IT agency, our information privacy office, our cybersecurity office, our data analytics office, and our legacy chief technology officer. And then we also had some burgeoning work in algorithms management that was operating under the last mayor's office. And so all of that came under the same umbrella and the same agency. And that is a pivotal moment, so to speak, that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in just a moment. The other key thing about this executive order was not just the rearrangement and the reorganization of these offices, but the empowerment of this new office to be able to actually set policy and have a clearer role in oversight of agency technology. New York City's government is gigantic. There's 45 different agencies and another 75 offices, depending on how you count. And so this was an opportunity to put a little bit more structural and programmatic oversight and centralization around agency operations related to technology. So that was a really important step in our process. And I want to talk a little bit about the transition from some of the work that was done previously to where we are now. I think likely people on the call may be aware that we have had an AI strategy that came out at the end of 2021. That was done at the very end of the last administration, and was focused on a really comprehensive look at what the major and as comprehensive as possible components of thinking about AI in government could be. So it was a really robust document that focused on not only sort of the practicalities of AI in government, but also had a lot of resources around explanations, primers, really sort of diving into why some of these topics matter and why they should be involved in an AI strategy. At the same time, I mentioned the city was doing some preliminary work around what we called algorithms management, which wasn't necessarily 100% overlapped with AI, but was an opportunity to start bringing together some initial ideas around governance of algorithmic decision-making in the city. And where we prioritized was a transparency process with the AI registers of Amsterdam and Helsinki, of course, being excellent models. And had great opportunities to talk to them about how they did algorithmic transparency. And so we actually published our first algorithms register in 2021, and then again in 2022. That going forward is actually going to be part of local law now. So it's going to be an even more robust and routine process. So that transparency component is absolutely here to stay in New York and is something that our team is going to continue to focus on. Then we had the consolidation, we had the change in administration. And so the AI strategy had been published. We had done some preliminary work around algorithmic transparency. Now what? So, I mentioned the consolidation as a sort of inflection point and an opportunity to be able to think about our next steps. So there's now a reconfiguration of our thinking to focus on the priorities of this administration, as well as what the logical next steps are after having published an AI strategy. And there's two major components to that. One is that we are now staffing appropriately for that sort of work. So in my team here at CIDOB, we're going to be hiring a director of AI and machine learning, and that person is in essence going to be the city's centralized resource for matters related to AI and machine learning for city agencies. By no means would we expect that person to manage every single, corner of the space, because obviously the government is quite large and there are lots of agencies who are very capable in terms of their own technology, but certainly to be able to set some citywide standards and some citywide approaches that help to create consistency from one agency to the next. And then, like I've been mentioning, the second big plank of this change is reorienting from our AI strategy into our AI action plan. And so this is our big moment to focus exactly what Paula was saying at the end of her presentation. You have your AI strategy. What comes next? What's the implementation? And for us, because our AI strategy, our original AI strategy, was very broad in scope and had a lot of material and was really focused on a lot of the underpinning sort of theory and concepts, the AI action plan is the logical next step to that. And what it gives us the opportunity to do is say, our AI strategy put everything on the table. Now let's figure out what we're going to do with that. And so really the advantage there with this AI strategy is that we're able to orient around our pressing needs and our priorities. The AI strategy, the original AI strategy, like I said, quite broad in scope. There's a lot to tackle, a lot to be able to get done there. And by necessity, you really have to prioritize when it comes to thinking about next steps and which actions you can take. And so this action plan is going to help us orient and focus on specific priority areas that matter for us to be able to get work done. What we're really thinking about as we develop this action plan in terms of some of those priorities, obviously concepts of governance. So governance is talked about so much when it comes to AI management, both in the public and private sector. And although there's a lot of thinking around AI governance and a lot of beginning examples of what it means to govern AI, there aren't a lot of examples of wholesale governance or comprehensive governance out there in government. And so we're really eager to be able to start thinking about what matters for governance for New York City and which pieces we want to be able to emphasize and focus on. We also want to spend a good amount of time focusing on definitions and terms. This has proven to be, over the past couple of years, something that has really sometimes gotten in the way of being able to move forward, where you don't have shared definitions or shared understandings of what AI even is. What is the relationship between AI and algorithms? What is the relationship between AI and other non-typically considered machine learning forms of data analysis? Where does the sort of governance of one category of tools end and another form of governance take over for a different category of tools? Without clarity around terminology and being able to have a shared understanding about what is being spoken about when we talk about AI governance, you hit a lot of roadblocks. And so we really want to spend time working on making sure that we've got shared, if not fully universal, at least largely agreed upon definitions and terms. And then we also want to focus a lot on use cases. So I think something that is often missing from the picture is understanding the diversity or the breadth of different use cases, because AI is not a singular solution, but instead a collection of different techniques and solutions. The number of use cases or the variety of use cases can be quite large. And we don't want to just focus accidentally on one category of use cases like risk models or some others that tend to be a bit more high profile. We want to make sure we're putting sufficient attention on other forms of use cases, including those that may be a little bit more mundane, a little bit more day-to-day and very operational. And then one other advantage of having this action plan is that, greater than our original strategy, the action plan has a greater degree of accountability. So the strategy that we originally drafted, because it only really focused on, I shouldn't say only because it was a huge amount of work, but it really focused on these concepts. It didn't have the explicit action items and the next steps necessarily. And so this is now an opportunity to introduce greater accountability by having actual actions that are associated with the major planks of the strategy that came before it. And overall, what we're expecting for our action plan to do is focus on a couple of different lenses that we think are pretty complementary. So the first lens is that we do think that there are opportunities for city agencies to be using AI and to use AI to help solve problems that they have, whether those are very internally focused or externally focused. And again, those could run a range from more salient or eye-catching type models, but they could also just be very run-of-the-mill things that haven't necessarily been incorporated into practice. So we do want to have an emphasis on looking where adoption makes sense, adoption of AI solutions makes sense, and where it would actually help the city to be able to provide services for residents better. But complement to that is to do so responsibly. So what we want to be able to say is that agencies probably do have a number of opportunities to leverage AI in a way that supports their efforts, but we want to make sure that there's the appropriate guardrails and structure around how AI is used. And obviously, there's a lot of shared thinking around the degree and categorizations of risk, which obviously is one of the key characteristics there. But don't want to minimize some of the other characteristics like privacy and security that are, for a large city like New York, extremely important. We have a lot of communities who you need to be able to trust that their government is treating their data with privacy, with sufficient privacy, and also that we're not having any data that are ever exposed in a risky sort of situation, and are taking all of the efforts that we can to be able to safeguard those data. And then our final lens for this action plan is really going to be thinking about engagement. And engagement takes a couple different forms, deals with a couple different audiences, and certainly would expect that we want to be able to continue the idea of having conversations with the public because AI can be a very dense, challenging topic to get into, and is also something that is kind of ripe with maybe not full on misinformation, but certainly a lot of ambiguity or lack of understanding about what AI really means in day-to-day use. So this is our effort for this year. Action plan is in progress, so we're anticipating being able to speak to this a bit more in detail later in this year, but really want to emphasize a couple of reasons why this action plan and our evolution from a strategy to an action plan is so important. One is that dealing with AI or managing AI is by necessity interdisciplinary, and Paula spoke to this at the end of her presentation as well. And I've already rattled off a couple of the teams that we work most closely with, like privacy, security, data analytics. But you really do have to think about managing or governing AI from an interdisciplinary lens. And you can't really do that without a strategy or a plan following a strategy in our case. You need that to be able to help you understand who you need to be speaking to, who are the different teams that are going to be involved in the management process. There's another component to this, which is what we call sort of AI exceptionalism. On the one hand, AI solutions can be part of a regular roster of solutions and don't necessarily need to be particularly exceptional compared to other solutions. Here again, privacy and security standards should and do apply to all technology, not just instances of technology that include AI. But at the same time, you want to be able to acknowledge that there is a bit of exceptionalism to AI, both because of the forms that it sometimes takes, the different forms of risk that emerge from AI. So we want to be cognizant of that. And again, you need a strategy to be able to help understand why it makes sense to think about AI as a particular form of solution versus, some of the historical solutions that governments have used. The other very pragmatic advantage of the strategy/action plan is that it helps you identify your resources. So if you're able to lay out in a strategy or plan, this is what matters to us, this is where we want to go, it's a much easier maybe not easy to solve the problem, but it certainly is easy to then identify what resources you would need to do that work. That is harder if you haven't actually put a plan in place and laid out what the major components of what you're trying to accomplish are. And then the last major advantage is accountability. So once you put that out there, you then have a greater degree of follow-up and onus on government to be able to then follow through with those actions. And presumably the actions that you've defined are ones that matter for good governance and matter to the people who you're serving. And so having that ability to be accountable to the plan or the strategy that you've made, you can't really do that if you haven't put that down on paper, right? If you haven't written this down and said, this is what matters to us, it's harder to be held accountable from a good government perspective. And so just a couple closing notes on what we've learned to be helpful in our process, both from our original AI strategy and as we're moving forward on this AI action plan. First and foremost, engagement. So talking to people, not just in the expected outcome of your strategy, but as part of the process of developing your strategy. And there was a huge amount of work done from colleagues of mine in the last administration to produce the last AI action plan, AI strategy, and the really robust public engagement and talking to academia, talking to community groups, talking to industry groups. It's really important to get representative views in putting your plan together. Obviously, that thread of engagement should follow through, but certainly from the development of the plan process, it should. The other thing that was important for us was to not necessarily be afraid of starting with a really broad scope. When you're talking about an AI strategy, it can seem like it's a lot to bite off, and that is true. There's a lot of different grounds to cover: governance, workforce, relationship with industry. Like, these are all things that actually speak to a city's potential AI strategy, and that's a lot. But it is often better to kind of take the time to figure out the broader scope of things and then be able to narrow your focuses later on than it is to go too far down one road and all of a sudden realize that you need to bring these other pieces into the conversation that you hadn't really thought about before. So don't really be afraid of broad scope. You can always narrow, and it's easier to narrow your scope than it is to widen it later down the road. And then, like I said before, another key thing is to focus on terms and definitions and explanations and examples. So something that's really helpful when thinking about an AI strategy or action plan, because some of these terms can be really challenging, particularly for non-technical audience members. Use examples, like walk people through specific things that represent the concepts that you're talking about. Our original AI strategy included a substantial appendix that was an AI primer that walked the reader through the entire life cycle of a hypothetical AI project, for example. And so examples matter, and we've seen this in the transparency space as well. Talking to agencies, you want to be able to say, report your algorithms. Okay, what does that mean? Here are some examples of what it would look like to report algorithms. And then finally, just to sort of cap it all off with what I started with, the organization matters. So as you both put together a strategy and think about implementing either a strategy or action plan, choose your term, the organization that's responsible for doing that really matters and what it's capable of doing and its relationship to other partners within your government. And so, like I said at the outset, we luckily we're all reconsolidated under the same office now. And so my team, who's driving the work behind this action plan, is really able to reach out to different groups whose expertise matters and really is critical to us drafting our action plan. And it's easy for us to do that now that we've been reorganized and have a unified mission. So think about the organizational challenges and opportunities that you have, because that will influence both the drafting of your strategy as well as your ability to implement. So I'm going to end it there because I know we're a little bit over, but I just want to sort of echo what's been said by both Marta and Paula previously, that obviously this is a really ambitious topic, but it's really important to be thinking about this at the city level, because cities to a certain degree have the maybe not the flexibility, but the mobility to be able to tackle these issues. And it's just great to be part of these conversations. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Alex, and also Paula, to keep your presentations very pragmatic with lots of recommendations, of suggestions. I bet that's precisely what our participants in the webinar today were looking for. So time to open the floor for anyone wishing to ask specific question to Paula or to Alex. We will need to keep this part a bit brief because, as Alex was saying, we are a bit over the time, but I see a hand from Leandri. So perhaps, Leandri, you can intervene and ask your question. You can also use the chat. It's up to you.
Okay. Many thanks, and thanks a lot for the presentations to Paula and Alex. So I just have like one or two few questions. I mean, maybe Alex talk about that. It's about the how to make how to we focus on something very specific in terms of when we talk about this kind of AI. I mean, the specific challenges. I want to know if you have a specific challenges that you address through what you have put in place. And then also, I'm probably sure that one of the reasons that you, develop this kind of framework to address AI in cities, it's basically because, what we see is like AI come with many challenges like inequalities and new forms of exclusion and these kind of things. Do you have, like, in your cases in Barcelona or in New York, some examples of this kind of exclusion and inequalities that emerge in your context, and then how your strategy trying to address or to overcome this kind of things? And then the last one is about the aspect of the adaptability of the strategy that you are putting in place, because we are dealing with something that is moving very fast. We talk about technologies AI, because we are talking about AI today, it could be something different tomorrow or in the coming weeks. How do you deal with this kind of adaptability and the fast moving of this technology? So thanks again for your presentation, and looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Great, fantastic questions. Paula, Alex, who wants to start? Alex?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. So to give an example of real sort of challenge and hurdle, I would say the transparency piece is a good example where, you can spend a really long time trying to perfect your reporting regimen and making sure you've got, every detail that you would ever want, or that you have defined your scope appropriately, but that's going to take forever. And at some point you just need to start moving forward. And that's what we did in New York. That's what Amsterdam and Helsinki did. And similar to us, they've also just improved it over time, right? You just take your opportunity to build out your requirements and change things based on feedback and what people are communicating to you and any issues that pop up. So I think the lesson there is don't be afraid of taking a bit of a leap. You don't have to have everything completely perfect before you start. On the notion of sort of impact and bias, I think where we are in New York is not in a place where we're examining individual tools at a micro perspective. I think where there are some challenges that we're anticipating is the interaction between bias and impact that's the result of algorithms or AI and the existing legal frameworks that address those issues. So the US has a very decades-long historical federal set of laws and policies and rules around discrimination. And it's not always clear how issues that are resulting from AI fit or are compatible with that framework. And that's a really big challenge that we face here in the US and at the local level in New York. So we're still interested in being able to move our conversation and being better able to understand that sort of interaction. I think I'm forgetting the third question, but I don't want to monopolize, so maybe give Paula a chance.
Maybe I can answer it. It's about adaptability and how we kind of keep up with the pace of innovations. I think at the end of the day, the core issue, like even if we have new technological innovations which might appear flashy and like new, and we don't know how to go about them, like not the metaverse and like all these things that we're seeing now. We just had Mobile World Congress here in Barcelona last week, and it was crazy to see everything that's going on. No, even if it looks like everything just taking a step forward.
Alex, you got frozen. I cannot hear you. I think we're having some connectivity problems.
We lost Paula, right?
Yeah, we lost Paula. I'm sorry, we lost Paula. Yeah, well, I see if Paula gets back to us. If not, we are really, okay, Paula, you're back. We just lost you. You want to finish in 30 seconds because we need really to wrap up this session.
No problem. I was just saying that at the end of the day, even if innovations look new, that's by definition, the core topics of justice, distribution of power, and how we serve people, are the same. So it's, but yeah, strategy should be adapted to what's coming up.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm really sorry to leave it here because both presentations were super interesting. I'm sure if we had more time, we would spend it delving deeper into some of the aspects you commented. I have some notes that I took regarding some of the messages that you said. It's important to move from strategy to action plan. I think that was common to both presentations. Also be very clear, right, on the terms, on the definition, engage with the civil society, with private sector, with the broader administration, very important, right? But we need to leave it here. I know there were a couple of additional questions here on the chat. I'm sorry that we cannot address them, but I want to thank you again, Alex and Paula, for your presentation. Also for the participants to join us for this webinar today. I just left the link for those of you that are interested in joining the next series of webinars that we have. Also the links to the Atlas and the Global Observatory on Urban Artificial Intelligence. And also very happy if you have any additional question you want to post to the speakers, perhaps you can also contact CIDOB, or we can see if there's any way of finding a moment to discuss in greater detail New York and Barcelona's strategies. Thank you again a lot for your participation today, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marta. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Espero que para
Thank
mañana
you.
no nos haya como que